Members, that takes us to motions on notice. Number 15, Industrial Hemp. The Honourable Dr Brian Walker.
Thank you, President. President, I move that this House recognises that industrial hemp has a huge potential to become a multi-billion-dollar industry here in WA. It's a crop with considerable environmental benefits for the state, with expanded trade and market opportunities in leaf and flower products and cannabidiol. B, encourages the government to consider a review of the state's industrial hemp laws and regulations to better allow the industry to flourish, with such a review to include, but not be limited to, 1, the levels of THC permissible within the definition of industrial hemp, and the ability to exercise some level of discretion in regards to hot crops during our summer months, and 2, the possibility of longer licensing periods, up to 5 years, from the current 3, and C, calls upon the government to look favourably upon the expansion and diversification of the industry throughout the state.
Members, the Honourable Dr Brian Walker has moved that motion, and the question is the motion be agreed. The Honourable Dr Brian Walker.
Thank you, President. Now, members will be aware from yesterday's news in the West, the headlines, "Thanks a ton, China. Iron ore slump could end cost of living help in WA." And they're noticing that for every dollar loss in the iron ore price, WA misses out on 94 million in royalties. And the thought here of the price coming down to 80, maybe even $70, would shave billions of dollars off our economy, and the effect, the knock-on effect in our society would be actually quite severe. In fact, I think the Premier mentioned that the volatility would inevitably affect WA. But also said that we understand the ramifications of living in a mining-based economy. Well, we do. And I have mentioned this, and indeed I know the then Shadow Minister of Shadow Treasurer, the Honourable Steve Thomas, several times had mentioned the volatility of the iron ore prices and the effect it will have on our budget. And on a number of occasions, I have mentioned that hemp is a crop which would certainly be helpful at balancing that that balance of trade, because we need to find some measure of security in our state. And so what I'll be pointing out today is how we as a state can move to protecting ourselves. And I'm just sad that the members of the mainstream media have decided not to pay attention to this. Maybe they'll deign to grant some measure of recognition in the future. Good man. Because, you see, there's people like yourself who will definitely be benefiting from the advantages of a hemp-based economy. Now, hemp, you see, people might say, how long has hemp been around for? Well, how long has the world been around for? They're one of the oldest cultivated crops in human history. And it's got at least over the last 4,000 years, apart from in China making paper and ropes, and India, the Middle East as well, making ropes for sails and clothing. In fact, it used to be essential to have hemp here when the first fleet came. We needed to grow hemp so that we would have ropes and sails for our sailing boats. It goes on to say that in Europe, hemp became a critical crop. For making, again, ropes and sails and the items of daily use. The Islamic age was no different. The colonial period in America, it was a vital crop in the American colonies. A vital crop. Without hemp, they would not have been able to flourish as they did. Moving into the 19th century, it states a staple crop for pioneers in the US as they were expanding westwards. And, of course, the decline then came. You might wonder why the decline, but there's environmental, economic reasons for that, I'm sure. But we could talk about that at some length over a coffee. Now, the 20th century, the Marijuana Tax Act came into the States in 1937, and that heavily regulated the cultivation of hemp because it conflated hemp with marijuana. There's an important word, conflated hemp with marijuana. They lifted that ban, if you like, in World War II because, of course, it was essential for the war products there, and then later again it was again banned. And it's largely banned in many countries now due to the war on drugs. If you're going to conflate hemp with marijuana, yes, you're going to want to combine that with the failed war on drugs. But hemp is not a drug, so why was it therefore made so unpopular? Why? There must have been some reason for that. I can only assume there had to be some economic reason, because it certainly was not a medical reason, certainly was not a societal reason. Indeed, now, that in the 21st century, we're experiencing a revival of hemp, particularly for sustainable products, and the legalisation in the US under the 2018 Farm Bill. So today, it's used in a wide range of products. The people do say 20,000 different products. I was, in my clinic, I was particularly surprised to hear from a representative of a company making bomb and bulletproof motors for the covers for motors for the ADF. Imagine you're in a war zone, there's bombs and bullets flying around, and your motor is protected by a cover made of hemp and carbon fibre. Now, this is the type of economy which we could then develop to send into space, could we not? Is it worth our time to have a closer look at this? And this is really what the motion is all about. Because all those three ABC points, they actually, I'm going to talk about them all in one, because we're looking at a holistic approach to a crop. Now, what are the key considerations? If we were to grow hemp freely in Western Australia, what could be the annual value? What would be the use of it? And we can look at how... What are we actually talking about with hemp itself? We've got, in the first point is the hemp utilisation. We're looking at the non-THC cannabinoids. We're looking at the fibres. Did we know, for example, that the fibres used to make pet bedding, you can see these in the pet shops now, pet bedding is about $1.5 billion worth of industry. The hemp seeds are available as a food product, a supplement, and a very useful product, omega-3, 6 and 9 being available, and you would find those as a very sensible part of an anti-inflammatory diet, and that would be only for use for people who are looking to manage their wellness. And it can also be a hemp biomass. We're looking here, maybe we're having troubles now looking here sensibly at the hemp, the industry around alternative fuels, and in particular hydrogen. Could hemp be used for creating hydrogen as a fuel? Yes, it could. But there's more to it. As a cropping system, as a cropping rotational crop, it can enhance the soil, and farmers would benefit greatly from the use of that to aid the yield they're getting from their other crops. It can be used as a standalone crop, and we'll talk about that in some detail later. We can look at is it useful? Is it a profitable product? Well, we've got the CBD production. The yields, it says, can vary. These are my estimates, by the way, my research. I'm actually asking for the government to help me in actually getting real research done into a live product on our paddocks here. But we could get between 1,000 to 2,000 kilograms of CBD oil per hectare. Is it valuable? We'll come to that in a moment. The fibre production, 3 to 10 tonnes per hectare, depending, of course, on the variety. And again, I remember the Honourable Alana McTiernan was telling us about the different strains which are producing valuable crops in WA just now. And seed production, seed yields ranging from between 500 to 1,200 kilograms per hectare. How about market prices? Well, the oil itself, the price can fluctuate, as indeed can all products fluctuate. But the oil can range in price from per kilogram $2,000 to $10,000, depending on what we're actually getting, depending on purity and, of course, market conditions. The fibre itself, between $200 to $500 per tonne, and seed prices between $2 to $5 per kilogram. Now, if you look at that, how much do you get for the wheat per hectare? We're talking between $700 and $800. Perhaps the Honourable Darren West can correct me on that, but that seems to be a fairly standard price. Yes, per hectare. Per hectare yield of wheat in WA?
Yeah, 700 to 1,000. Yep.
Very good. As a matter of interest, Honourable Darren West, what's the yield like in the eastern states?
Be a little bit higher than us, depending where you are.
Yeah,
not
3
much.
to 8 bag yield. Yeah. Okay. Now, but the area of potential cultivation could significantly influence the total value. For example, I'm going to use the example here of 10,000 hectares dedicated to hemp. And looking specifically at what could we do with that. Now, estimating then the annual value. And this is where we ought to be very careful. How are we as a society going to use hemp? And basically what we're talking about, apart from the benefits of hemp itself, is what is the profit coming into the country? How can we balance that trade deficit we might have if the price of iron ore goes down? Now, assuming 10,000 hectares for CBD production, at the numbers I've given, we'd be looking at something like, per 10,000 hectares, $75 billion. $75 billion. Now, the fibre for 20,000 hectares would just be 42 million, and for seed production for, again, 20,000 hectares, just $60 million. And that really is, those are significant figures, are they not? Could we not use them? I wonder, for 10,000 hectares devoted to producing CBD oil at 75 billion, how many hospitals could we build with that? So that's just shy of $75.1 billion annually, and that is my forecast without having the facilities to investigate this, which is why I'm calling on the government to consider looking at this in some detail, because if my figures are correct, and I assume they are, but I would like you to check them, assuming my figures are correct, we have at our disposal the potential for quite significant gains in our society. There's not just the gains in money, of course, there's plenty more we could look at. So the question I have now is, of course, why don't we do that? If we've got such a potential in front of us right now, there has to be a good reason for not doing it already. What could that be? Well, there's a number of reasons here. We've got, first of all, the historical prohibition. Now, as I said earlier, hemp was conflated with marijuana, which a name I hardly ever want to use because it's quite pejorative. I prefer the term cannabis, but we'll use the word marijuana, which led to strict regulations and outright bans on its cultivation. Why? Well, they're conflating hemp with cannabis, which could, of course, be used for a number of reasons, including also as a substitute for alcohol for people wanting to relax. And why was it banned? I don't really know. Why was it called a narcotic? Well, it absolutely should not be. So we have actually a lie at international level, which is then having a knock-on effect at the nations and states, which are preventing us from accessing a valuable growing herb because we're frightened of a lie. And this really ought to be addressed. Do we want to falsely conflate the two, which is currently what we are doing? We can look at the licensing and compliance, and here we have a wonderful example in our state of how red tape and bureaucracy is making it simply difficult to get access to growing hemp. And part of the reason is, we want to be careful that there's not too much THC. Why? At the moment, we have got a fairly liberal 1% definition of THC, below which it's industrial hemp, and above that it's called something else. And you wonder, okay, so 1.5% THC, are we really going to want to raid that plant to smoke it? I remember very well, I remember here talking about, in replying, when I spoke about a hempcrete house, a house made with hempcrete, which is actually fireproof and carbon-saving and environmentally safe and friendly. And the words I got back was, but can you smoke the house? Which reflects basically a complete misunderstanding of what's going on here. And so this type of thinking is really one of the reasons why we are stuck in the past of saying, no, hemp, we have to regulate that and regulate it heavily. So would 1.5% mean that people go into to grab that to smoke a low THC herb? Well, look, under 10%, no one's going to want to be interested. What I'm prescribing now is looking at something like 20%, up to 32%. So 10%, 2%, where's the problem? Are we actually stopping a major cash inflow into our economy because we're frightened of a non-existing problem? Another reason for concern is the fluctuating prices and market volatility, which, of course, could have an effect on the marketable value. But also, and this is important for us just now, because we're making it difficult to actually grow hemp, we've actually got a problem with the lack of established markets, because if you haven't got the product going, then there's no offtake. No one's going to want to get a product which is difficult to access. So it's a kind of a circular reasoning here. If there's no one's going to take it, no one's going to grow it. If no one's growing it, no one can take it. We have a problem. And this should be, I think, addressed with sensible regulation. And the last one is, of course, maybe we should, if we allow this to happen, we're going to oversupply. If we rapidly increase the growth of any product, we might have oversupply, prices crashing, people going bankrupt, and that would be an issue. Then again, how many people know how to grow hemp? It's called a weed in other places, but Is it easy to grow? Well, it needs to be grown properly. There's pest and disease management, and DPIRD here would be very well interested in seeing how safe this is, especially if you consider the polyphagous shot hole borer and the effect it's having on trees. Could we not then look at replacing our current wood supply with hemp? That's a possibility. Would it save us money? It's certainly a possibility. Should we consider it? Yes, we should. But it should also be examined by competent authorities who are not afraid to have an open mind and an opinion which is open to all possibilities, including proving me wrong. The crop rotation concerns, it's beneficial as a crop, but it does require planning. I do not know of any single farmer who is going to plant crops or manage animals without planning. So, of course, planning is part of that. Another major problem we've got at this moment, and we have this currently in the southwest of WA, is a lack of processing facilities. The fibre that needs to be processed, the hemp seeds, the CBD oil itself, all of these require specialised facilities. And if we haven't got the offtake, who's going to invest in the infrastructure required to produce the product? And with that, of course, comes a high initial investment. This all requires capital, and this is one place where the government could very well be of importance in helping this to take off, to flourish. There's economic and financial barriers, of course, there's access to capital. If it's perceived that we're growing a dangerous crop that could be used for drug seekers, then, of course, the banks will be unwilling to loan. We need to have a strong think about how we protect those who wish to grow hemp. And again, that's an area where government could very well be of great importance. And the high initial costs, of course, anyone who's trying to start a new business will know how expensive it can be and how deadly it is to your bank account. Got another area, of course, is the association with marijuana, with cannabis. We know the differences are there. We can see them quite clearly, but the stigma is there because 90 years of propaganda makes it difficult to speak the truth with an open mind. We've also got research and development gaps. I mean, I mentioned here that wonderful shield, that protective motor cover, which protects ADF vehicles from bombs and bullets. We haven't had the time or the opportunity to actually really investigate the potential because it's been so difficult to actually produce the crop in the first place. And then, of course, the international issues. It's all very well if Western Australia grows a brain and decides that hemp is safe, and if Australia then follows suit, what about the countries we wish to export to? So we're going to have issues, I think, in the not too distant future, trying to find good relations with people who are prepared to accept a healthy, healing solution to what could be quite major problems. And another area which we ought to look at, I'm missing out a few due to lack of time, is the lack of government support and incentives. Because, unlike other major crops, hemp has traditionally received little in the way of government subsidies or support. Although I must confess, the support that companies known to me here have received good help from the government, and for that I do thank the government, the Cook government. So, okay, so that being the case, where are we going to go with this? The challenges of industrial hemp cultivation, one of the challenges is including the hot crops. Now, but by hot crop, I mean under certain temperature conditions, the percentage of the cannabinoids, including THC, can vary. And with that, the level of THC can rise above the current mandated level of 1% maximum. So what can we do about that? How can we protect farmers from having suddenly been accused of raising a drug crop rather than a hemp crop? So we need to have a scientific review and a risk assessment. Again, this is what the government would be advised to do. Let's look at this very closely. Is that limit of 1% really sensible? And I have to acknowledge, Australia has raised that limit from 0.3% to 1%. Like Switzerland has as well. And I do think that's a good step in the right direction. But as I said, under 10%, no one is going to be interested in this as anything other than industrial hemp. So would 2% kill you? 2.5%? Would that kill you? So shall we look at that and see what the actual risks are? I calculated a little while earlier, if we feed hemp to animals, say cows, as a very good feedstock, if we did that, would there be tetrahydrocannabinol in the meat? Yes, there would, a small amount. How much would I need to take to get one particular high? About 300 kilograms just now. So a couple of cows to eat to get one high. I can think of a lot better ways of getting high if anyone thinks that's a good idea, and I personally do not. But if you did, I certainly wouldn't be buying 300 kilograms of meat to achieve it. So we could maybe relax the THC limits. That would, of course, be a very sensible thing to do. The 1.5, 2%, maybe we should get some flexibility. That is an area where the government could certainly do some work. We could develop like a tiered licensing system. Maybe if we look at between 1 and 2%, we could have one level of licensing, above that more, below that less. These are things, again, which the government departments would be very capable of assessing what is the risk to the population, the risk to our economy, and the risk to the farmer. We might have conditional tolerance for hot crops. Conditional tolerance, we might legislate for that. We could have a mitigation strategies for farmers with guidelines and support to mitigate the risks of hot crops. We could enhance our testing and monitoring capabilities. I know of one case earlier this year where the farmer had actually called in November of last year saying, these crops are going to be hot, come and test. So nothing happened until April, when the people came along and said, oh, you got a hot crop, and then began to do him, having the police searching the place and arresting and confiscating, because he was now guilty of having grown a drug crop, although the percentage was actually very, very low. Just it was above 1%, as indeed predicted. And being treated as a drug dealer when all you're trying to do is grow a healthy crop is really quite testing. We could do remote sensing and AI monitoring. We can do that. And we could even collect data. The Internet of Technology could actually regulate these things and look at them and give us proper information in a timely manner. We could educate. We could educate both the farmers and the politicians and the people about this, and we could certainly help with research. And this is again an area where we could get good results from government.